A battle over, of all things, a laptop has now ignited a new legal feud and back and forth between prosecutors and Sean Combs' defense counsel in his criminal case.
But he wants to use the laptop in his, quote, unit.
Diddy's lawyers say the offense raided his jail cell and seized a bunch of...
Diddy brille case Dewan in court after feds sabotag his laptop. The music mogul, who is currently behind bars, has been battling valiantly to gain access to a laptop that he claims is essential to his defense. But now Diddy's attorneys allege the government is undermining his attempts, and the case has taken a drastic turn. Keep checking back as we analyze the most recent developments in this explosive case. It all started when Diddy's attorneys requested that Diddy give him a laptop while he was incarcerated. They claim that Diddy's capacity to prepare his defense is seriously jeopardized without the laptop, which is necessary for examining the mounds of information related to his case. This case is not straightforward. Without the right resources to examine this evidence, Diddy is fighting what his team refers to as an incredibly large case with a ton of materials that need to be thoroughly reviewed. According to his defense, he hasn't been given an equal opportunity to defend himself.
Sean Combs' legal team has just raised, I would say, a new issue, sort of new issue to the court, and we're going to address it right now, and it concerns, of all things, believe it or not, access to a laptop while he's in the Metropolitan Detention Center, the MDC, where he's currently locked up while he's waiting trial next year. And before I even go into the defense's letter, I said it was new, but really, this is an issue that has come up before. You see, Sean Combs' defense lawyers, they have argued that the conditions at the MDC make it incredibly difficult for him to properly review evidence in the case and prepare for trial. And yes, he has a constitutional right to prepare for his trial. But they have been arguing for quite some time that because of the incredible amount of material in this case, you really can't do it without a laptop. He needs a laptop to review everything. I mean, this is a massive case. Combs is accused of sex trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, transportation to engage in prostitution, and they are looking at him allegedly operating a criminal enterprise from 2008 to 2024. That is a long, long time period. And when he was first arrested, prosecutors at the time, they said they interviewed more than 50 victims and witnesses. They obtained over 90 cell phones, laptops, over 30 electronic and storage devices, firearms, physical evidence, records that were obtained pursuant to over 300 grand jury subpoenas and voluntary production. Think about how much.
As a result, Diddy's attorneys requested that the government provide him with a laptop while he is incarcerated, and they even requested that Diddy be permitted to use the laptop in his room.
They really want Diddy to be able to have this laptop in jail, in prison, and issues keep arising. So this is a letter. It was submitted just yesterday, 3 pages long, by Mark Agnifilo. So what's he saying about the laptop? He's complaining about the laptop. We write on behalf of Diddy to request the court direct the prison or the jail that he's staying in to provide Diddy with a laptop prepared for him by the government and allow him to use the laptop in his unit. So they're still asking for the same things, but it seems like now Mark Agnifilo is also further asking for Diddy to be able to use the laptop in his actual cell. Okay, now he's calling it unit. I don't know if there's a difference between a unit and a cell. Someone with more knowledge than me, please do comment below. But he wants to use the laptop in his, quote, unit. And then it says, consistent with the way other inmates on his unit are permitted to use their laptops. Now, out the gate, I don't know if everybody on Diddy's unit is accused of the same things that Diddy is accused of. I don't know what the people on Diddy's unit are in there for. If any of it is for showing revenge porn, for example, you know, he might have a good.
Diddy's attorneys claim that the jail has not yet given him the promised laptop despite their repeated requests, so they made another one. When pressed, the government gave Diddy 2 options that would let him use the laptop for specific amounts of time, but only one of them could be selected. Diddy's defense team countered that both options were unjust and would prevent Diddy from thoroughly reviewing the case materials.
2 months after he was charged and detained on November 25th, 2024, The government provided the NBC with a laptop that Mr. Combs can use to review discovery, take notes related to his case, and otherwise assist in his defense. In the 9 days since then, Mr. Combs has still not been provided with the laptop despite numerous inquiries by defense counsel. And Combs' lawyers double down because they say this morning, and this was filed on December 4th, by the way, they say this morning the government gave them only two options. One, Sean Combs will only be provided with a laptop in the unit's video conference room during select times when legal staff is available and when that room is not otherwise being used during other inmates' legal calls. Or two, he will only be provided with the laptop in the legal visiting room between the hours of 8 and 3:30 p.m., but not both. So not both. Now, Sean Combs' lawyers objected to this. They say these restrictions are, quote, untenable, they're unjustified, and they argue it seems to only be placed on Combs, that these restrictions were not placed on other inmates in his unit or on his unit. And they say the problem is this limits the amount of time he has to use the laptop because he's going to either be forced to choose between using the laptop or meeting with his attorneys. He only has limited time. And Combs' lawyers say essentially if this is about security or privacy issues with what he's viewing, the material doesn't contain any evidence designated as attorney's possession only.
The focus doesn't end there. In their most recent letter, Diddy's legal team claims that the government has gone too far. They brought up a disturbing instance in which federal agents took pictures of Diddy's writings inside his jail cell. According to Diddy's attorneys, these writings may contain privileged information. So the defense expressed grave concerns about whether the government is upholding Diddy's rights.
And then they write this. Moreover, given the government's efforts to surreptitiously monitor and record his handwritten legal notes, Mr. Combs' need for a laptop to take legal notes free from government surveillance is heightened. Now, that is in reference to what happened a few weeks ago when the defense accused the government of possibly violating Sean Combs' rights by having in their possession photographs of paperwork in Combs' jail cell that they say might have been privileged writings. That is a whole separate issue that Judge Subramanian has been working through to see whether or not privileged material was improperly photographed and handed over to the prosecution. But even so, they brought it up again here as a little kind of sting to the prosecution.
Putting more fuel on the flames, federal authorities recently raided Diddy's detention cell, according to his legal team, further violating his rights.
A new big development around Diddy as we're following this case very closely here on Live Now from Fox as Diddy's lawyers say the feds raided his jail cell and seized a bunch of privileged material. So an interesting one to say the least about this. I want to put up some posts here from former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani about this, saying Diddy's lawyers are claiming that it violates his Fourth Amendment right. However, inmates don't have Fourth Amendment expectation of privacy in prison, so that argument is weak. Guards can search his cell without probable cause or a warrant. So a big development there in terms of this. Privileged material, different. The feds usually have a taint or dirty team of agents who aren't working on the case to conduct these searches. That way, if they see privileged materials, the clean team won't be disqualified from the case. It goes on to say as well, the prosecutors have reason to believe Diddy is obstructing justice from the prison by contacting witnesses through intermediaries. They made the same argument during his bail hearing. I think they have evidence to back it up. All right, as we continue on, witness tampering also falls under the crime fraud exemption to attorney-client.
Raid has raised rumors that the FBI is preparing a second case against him, maybe charging him with violating jail regulations, pressuring witnesses, or contacting those he is not permitted to contact. If confirmed, these charges could further worsen Diddy's already poor circumstances.
The situation just got a lot more heated. He's been committing crimes from his jail cell, trying to obstruct justice and intimidate witnesses, and the FBI, they just raided his jail cell and took all of his stuff. Now, this really pisses defense attorneys off because clearly they've gathered evidence that's going to make it a lot harder for them to do their jobs because he was in there writing notes, probably potentially to send out third party to other people to have them continue intimidating witnesses. Keep in mind that all of this comes right on the heels of them having recorded jail phone calls, of him using other people's phone accounts to be able to contact people and have them contact witnesses to try to get them not to testify against him. All of this is super illegal to do. Now his attorneys are claiming that some of the stuff that they took was actually covered under attorney-client privilege. Basically, if you have communications between you and your attorney, they're not allowed to touch that. But the FBI has already countered with the fact that they have a private, objective third party that's gone through and made sure that that's not anything that they're looking at. But now there's an emergency court hearing to determine what's going to happen out of all of this, and we're going to keep you updated as we get more.
Lawyers contend that this so-called raid violated his constitutional rights, and that any evidence that could have been gleaned from private materials should not be admitted in court.
In fact, information that was attorney-client privilege or not, the court hasn't yet decided. Then, Diddy's attorneys filed a motion about his use of the laptop and not being able to use the laptop, and the government's and the MDC's restrictions on how he can use the laptop, they say are too restrictive, and they want the court to hear them about that. And then, but wait, there's more! Diddy's lawyers filed a full motion to suppress. We're going to go over this 33-page motion later in the week. Make sure you have the Laundered app so you know exactly when I'm going to cover it, because this week has been incredibly dynamic already. But let's talk about what the lawyers are asking for. They are asking for an order for discovery and a discovery hearing, suppressing Sean Combs's privilege notes, those are the legal pad that say legal, and any fruits of the illegal search, which would mean anything that the government might discover from having looked at those notes, any witnesses or information. When we deep dive this, we'll talk about more about some of the exceptions to that. It's not automatically out. New York does recognize inevitable discovery, so we will talk about that when we deep dive this, but that's what the defense is asking for, that anything that's FOP'd gets pulled out, FOP'd, fruit of the play.
Despite Diddy's defense team's efforts, the government is resisting the laptop request. Prosecutors argued Diddy's arguments were premature and pointless, pointing out that many other prisoners in the same institution are subject to similar limitations, and next, only 3 of the 25 prisoners in Diddy's section are reportedly able to use laptops, while only 1 is allowed to use it in their cell, a privilege that prosecutors claim was granted under completely different conditions.
Asking the court to order the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, to provide Sean Combs this laptop and to allow him to use it in his jail unit, and to also stop sending these attorney visitation forms to the government, to the prosecutors. Well, as you can imagine, not surprisingly, the prosecution responded, and they argue that what the defense is asking for is premature and moot. They write, pretrial defendants housed at MDC review discovery during designated hours using computers within their housing units. In exceptional cases, particularly those with especially voluminous discovery, courts in this district have permitted certain pretrial defendants to access laptops preloaded by the government with discovery materials so that those defendants can prepare for trial while in custody. And the prosecutors cite other cases to support that. And they say, look, the MDC informed us that out of approximately 25 other inmates in the defendant's unit, in Sean Combs' unit, only 3 other inmates are actually allowed to use laptops. So in other words, Combs, he is in a unique position. He is being granted kind of an advantage here in a way. But the government cautions, look, even if he's being provided a laptop, normally a general rule of practice is that comes with limitations. That comes with
Prosecutors maintain that Diddy already gets greater access than the majority of prisoners, portraying his complaints as inflated. Diddy's legal team replied, but they were unable to mount a compelling counterargument.
Only 3 of them can use the laptops, quote, including the defendant and Hernandez cited above. So Diddy cited to a case and said the other people were granted this permission by a court before. And the government's like, yeah, Your Honor, hint freaking hint. 1 person who was granted this out of 3 total who exist at all in this unit is on the unit with Diddy. The government said, in exceptional cases where discovery laptops are permitted, so they're not generally permitted, is 3 out of 25 can use a laptop in there. And when they are permitted, they are always subject to restrictions, including the Hernandez case, which Diddy had cited. Access to the discovery laptop Monday through Friday in the visiting room for 10 to 15 hours per week, required that Hernandez defendant to execute a contract that he was not going to share the contents of the laptop with other inmates and other stuff like that. In this case, the government agreed to provide a laptop to him, and we began sharing stuff with him. We had to prioritize the stuff that Mark Agnifilo wanted us to prioritize.
As an example, they cited another well-known prisoner in the same unit that Sam Bankman released who was allegedly given laptop access to support his defense and even used it to share materials with his defense team. Kay's defense, however, is not backing down, arguing that denying him the ability to take notes or review evidence on a laptop violates his constitutional rights because he's under increased government surveillance.
But now we have a follow-up response from the defense, and the battle of the laptop and visitation continues. So, in their subsequent letter to Judge Subramanian, Combs' lawyers say, quote, "First, contrary to the government's argument, Mr. Combs' reasonable request for laptop access is consistent with the way other inmates in his unit access their laptops. Other inmates are permitted to use their laptops in the unit, notwithstanding the fact that their laptops also contain sealed material subject to protective orders. There is no reason to treat Mr. Combs differently." And they cite cases in support of that, although I'll tell you what's interesting. By the way, little legal primer here. In legal letters like this, correspondence, briefs, complaints, anything, when you cite a case, you cite the case, the name of it, you cite the citation where it can be found, some of the details like the court, the year, and then in parentheses, there's a brief snippet that you're quoting about, whether it's a specific quote or the holding of the case, the main point that you want to say, why is this case relevant? I thought it was interesting here that in the brief description of each case that they cite, it doesn't say anything about using a laptop in a private unit or about sensitive materials per se. It's just about how defendants were able to more liberally use laptops. Just thought that was interesting.
Is worse, it's evident that things aren't looking good for the music legend as Diddy's legal issues continue to mount and his triumphs are few and far between, as this is the third time his plea for parole has been denied.
Combs' lawyers say that it is absurd that prosecutors are saying Combs can't take notes on the laptop because he could take notes on the discovery on the laptop, and taking notes on discovery on the laptop is the same thing as taking legal notes about the case, that he should be able to do that on the laptop. And they follow up and double down, saying that he has a right, especially since his legal notes, they alleged, were improperly photographed. That's the issue that I talked about before. And they argue if he has to keep taking handwritten notes, it, quote, subjects them to further surveillance by the government. That is unjustified. But they also say Sean Combs is being treated differently. They argue that that would be, quote, inconsistent with how other inmates in his unit have been using laptops to create and share work product in their cases with their lawyers. And you know who Combs' lawyers actually cite in support of that? Sam Bankman-Fried. Remember him, the crypto fraudster? They argue that in that case, there was a laptop, and it was said that that laptop would enable him, presumably the defendant, to review materials and share work product with counsel through the exchange of hard drives. And Sean Combs' lawyers say, look, if they don't get what they're asking for in the end right here, then this would infringe on Combs' constitutional right.
Where does this leave us then? What do you think about this ongoing battle? Is Diddy being treated unfairly, or are these restrictions just standard procedure? Diddy's lawyers are still fighting for his rights, claiming the government is sabotaging his defense. But with prosecutors refusing to back down and no signs of compromise, it's clear this battle is far from over. Please share your ideas in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit the notification and like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for additional updates on this evolving topic. Until then, be informed.